Hello. Hello. So today I would like to talk to you about what is enough. This is a question that I've been thinking about simply because, moving to a new place, new country, and kind of going off and having a different type of life, there's so many problems, essentially. Like when you're sort of not on the default path, or like there's just so many different aspects of your life that you kind of have to solve, right? Like, I came to Vietnam and I spent a lot of time dealing with health insurance, figuring out like, what kind of work I want to do, where do I want to put my money, dating, housing. It's just like you kind of don't realize how many like aspects of life are set for you, and when you go to a completely different place, and you kind of have to rebuild all of that from scratch. Now, that's not the interesting part. The interesting part is lately I just been feeling like super tired, actually. And in my previous life, in the Bay Area, I felt like I was something of an optimizer. I would try to figure out the optimal way to do stuff. And there's no way. Like, I can't do that at all here. And honestly, it has been a good experience for me. Like just getting out of my head and like not optimizing everything, because I simply can't. I don't have enough time, essentially. Like, and there's like these certain, I believe that there's like these certain aspects of life, like just take for example like finance or investing, where it's just like this like sort of infinite game. You have constantly have maintenance, so finances, like, you can sort of go and try to, let's say you learn how to trade or something like that, or you learn how to do that type of thing. It's just, you constantly have to like watch it and manage it, which is super annoying. Another thing is like maybe dating, right? Like dating is, at least modern dating, if once you open up your apps and such, there's like a lot of people, and it's not, there's a, it's, if you go around and try to optimize and be like, okay, can I find a hotter partner, a more successful one, or yada yada, it's like never ending, essentially. So one thing that I've been really asking myself across all various aspects of life is like, what is the stopping criteria? How do you decide what is good enough? Not for just for myself, but but like generally, like let's say as a human being, like, because I don't think we're that different, as human beings and such. We all have different wants and needs, but maybe biologically we kind of have, maybe like probably have similar ones, right? But I believe in the modern world there's these sort of, especially what's dangerous if it's like kind of shiny, it's like making money or investing or dating or some of these things. I just feel like they can be endless optimizations, or like even like health too. Like you see, like for example, Brian Johnson, like Don't Die. Like, that's cool. I think it's a cool science experiment for sure. But if you look at a human life and there's just too many things that you have to pay attention to, like throughout a day. Like, let's say you go off the default path and like you have to reconstruct your health stack, finance stack, dating stack, housing stack, whatever. It's just too much. So the thing that I'm really obsessed with right now in life is trying to figure out how to radically simplify, actually. And I felt like this was especially true because I recently spent a lot of time to do, like, I was a software engineer, to do AI programming, right? That's like kind of all the rage now, to use Codex, Claude, whatever, to write code. And that is also another example of like basically endless optimizations, endless meta optimizations, and this or that. Like, people are perfecting their workflows, and I was, kind of doing that too. And at some point I was like, I'm spending so much money and tokens. What am I actually trying to do here, essentially? So I think that's the theme of what I'm really trying to explore, is for a lot of these domains, whether it's like AI coding, whether it's like, so like work essentially, or like, what is good enough? Like, what allows you to stop? What allows you to sort of close the loops so that you can have your attention? Because right now I feel like my life is just, it's too busy, and I don't feel like I'm actually getting anywhere. And I believe my current theory is I need to figure out how to define good enough for these different things, and basically find some sort of system to free up my attention. Because again, if you take these domains like AI coding or dating or investing or a number of these fancy ones, especially fancy ones, the fancy ones are dangerous because they're like endless. But as a human being, you're like finite. You have a limited amount of attention. And so how do you decide what is good enough, and how do you sort of give up enough that you can free up your attention? Like, I'm not even sure what I would be doing, because currently I have so little attention on what I want to like really think about. I've been just dealing with housing and visa issues and like just all sorts of stuff that I feel like I'm treading water, just doing admin and not really getting anywhere. So that is my current research project, to figure out how to define good enough. And I'm particularly really inspired by a man named Herbert Simons, who when I was doing the Asian AI coding, with AI coding, he was a behavior psychologist who wrote about the architecture of complexity. And actually, I believe that his work has a lot of relevance to AI coding. For example, he has a story about like the different like watchmakers. I believe it's like Tempest, or I don't know. I kind of forgot the exact names. But the idea, I need to explain this a little bit better. But okay, so I think with this type of stuff, I need to write an essay actually. So maybe I will attach the essay. So anyways, he created this concept called like satisficing. We need to figure out what is good enough and sacrifice the rest. And when I first read that, I was like, no. I want the best. I want optimal. But now I realize that it's not possible. Or like, my current theory is that for most of the things in life, you kind of just satisfies. And for a few things that you choose to want to go really deep in, that you just go really deep in. But first, you kind of have to secure the foundations. Okay, another thing I kind of want to say is, so I'm building my current life, and one thing I'm very interested in testing is the idea of dependencies. Because like in software, there's what I learned from sort of AI programming is that it's really just about planning and figuring out what the dependencies are and making things reliable. Like, the foundations always have to sort of come first, duh, but it's I don't think most people treat life planning that way. They kind of just sort of say, okay, like, I want this, and therefore, that's fine. But the question is like, okay, what is the sequencing? What is the bottlenecks, and what is the dependencies? And going to a new country where none of the infrastructure is laid out, it's become pretty clear to me there's these dependencies, right? Let's suppose my goal was that I wanted to move to a country, I wanted to build a new life, I want to do good work, and yada yada, I want to enjoy myself, I want to learn a few things, yada. That's a good goal, but you kind of have to decompose all the things that are part of this big goal, right? Like, it's kind of like software planning, right? Like, let's say you wanted to create a piece of software, or you want to create some project or something. You kind of have to decompose into different tasks, and then sequence the tasks to accomplish it. But my idea is like, I wonder if it's possible to do that with like life in general. Like, let's say you kind of have a goal, and then you decompose it, and then figure out how to sequence it really correctly. For example, let's say I'm moving to Vietnam and such. It's not as simple as just moving here and then, everything's cheap and therefore, like everything works. Not at all, actually. It's actually quite difficult. Yeah, it's like not easy, I would say. It's certainly not easy. Like, let's say you have a goal. Like, what are the dependencies for the goal? For example, this particular goal, it might be visa first, and then you need like a stable housing situation, because people kind of travel. Let's say you travel every 3 days. There's no way you can get any real work done, Let's say your goal was to be some sort of digital nomad, right? Or whatever. How can you do that in a new country? How do you decompose, and what's the sequencing? The first is obviously visa, like which countries can, if you don't have the visa situation sorted out, that's a limiting on housing, right? You can't sign a 6-month lease or like a 1-year lease on a housing unless you have the visa sorted. So that's like bottleneck number one. And then you kind of have to figure out housing, because living in like hotels and moving every 3 days, you're never going to get any real work done, like each time you move to a new hotel, you have to like unpack. And then when you leave that hotel, you have to repack. And generally, you waste a lot of time, and then you always lose stuff. Like when you do the shuffle, essentially, I've lost like so many random shirts and stuff. Like it's super nerve-wracking actually every time you move, for me at least. So yeah, so then it becomes housing. And then once you solve housing, then you get your attention back from housing, and then there's like other problems. So like, I guess my point is, I'm less interested in finding some grand vision or finding some grand thing to do. My sort of philosophy at the current moment is just trying to aggressively eliminate open loops that take up my attention, essentially. And decomposing the problem into its like tasks, and then sequencing it correctly. So yeah, that's how I'm thinking about things.